Hi everyone, Daryl here from Easily Corp. Okay, this session right, we're going to talk about the non-public register of registrable controllers. I think most of you guys will know what this is already. If you're not really sure, right, then let's establish what is a controller first. So a controller of a company is a person or entity that has either significant interest or significant control over the company. So there are two criteria. It's either significant interest or significant control. So what is significant interest? A significant interest is defined as having an interest in more than 25% of the shares of a company, or you have an interest in one or more voting shares in a company that constitutes to more than 25% of the voting power of the company. So for companies with no share capital, right, having a right to share in more than 25% of the company's capital or profits. The main motivation for this is because there's a special resolution, special shareholders resolution, which requires 75% votes to pass in the model constitution. And in essence, right, the special resolution can appoint and remove directors. So if you have a significant interest, right, you can actually veto a special resolution. So the special resolution to pass will require your approval in the vote as well. So this significant control actually touches on my example. So significant control can be defined as having direct or indirect right to appoint and remove directors who hold a majority of the voting rights at directors meeting. Okay, so directly or indirectly holding more than 25% of the voting rights, okay, or has the right to exercise significant influence or control over the company. So for example, some people may actually ask other people to hold the shares in trust for them, and let's say, like, for example, I have maybe a client. Let's say a client wants to hold shares in a certain company, but maybe does not want to have his name as the shareholder. So maybe he or she puts his mother as the shareholder. Then but at the same time, right, even though his mother is the one voting, he or she is the one who is wielding the control over this vote. So that person will also constitute as a controller because that person has significant control. Okay, now what must companies do? So companies are required to take responsible steps to identify and collect information on their registrable controllers. The reasonable steps, right, are fulfilled by sending out the following notices. So you can either send out the notice for controllers or the notice for persons who may know controllers. But for us, in Easily Corp, right, we actually send out both. We send out through a digital form, and if let's say you guys would have received it, then you would just fill up the digital form, and then we will receive that the notice has been filled. So these notices are to be sent within 2 business days after the date on which the company first knows the existence of a person who the company has reason to believe is a controller or knows a controller. Okay, like I mentioned, right, the notices can be sent via hard or soft copy. We send soft copy, and registered mail is optional. So you don't have to send through registered mail. You can send it hard copy via normal snail mail. If not, then you can send soft copy via email, or like us, we digitize the form and then we send it out to all the controllers of all the companies under our portfolio. And the notice for controllers, right, must require the addressee to state whether he or she is a registrable controller of the company. So like when we send a notice for controllers, right, and then that person receives it, he or she has to state that he or she is the registrable controller of the company. And then the second question is a little bit vague, right? But essentially, it's just asking this registrable controller, right, whether he or she knows any other person or entity, right, that may be a registrable controller. And then, if any information that's required, right, will also include in the form. So for this one, the notice for persons who may know controllers, right, like I mentioned before, have to we actually ask whether you know whether any other person is a registrable controller. So a shareholder, right, or is shareholder or controller, right, it can either be an individual or entity. So if it's an individual, right, these are the particulars which are required for the lodging of this non-public register of registrable controllers. This is the information that we have to put inside the controller register. And then this is for entity. Okay, so it can be a local Singapore entity or it can be a foreign entity. If it's a foreign entity, then like I mentioned down here, the unique entity number or equivalent, the legal form, jurisdiction, and statute where the entity was formed and incorporated. So these are all the based on whichever date that the whichever jurisdiction or whichever country that the entity is incorporated in. Okay, so some people may think that this is a new thing. It's not a new thing. The new thing is the digital format, which means that there's a online portal whereby we have to lodge this non-public register of registrable controllers. But since 31st of March 2017, there was an amendment to the Companies Act, and it was already made mandatory that this register of registrable controller, right, was supposed to be maintained, which meant that for us, we actually keep the physical files of the companies, then they are kept in our register office. So we actually have a register which is essentially like a booking bookout book for those of you who are in the who have been through national service in Singapore. You book in and book out, so which is the day that this individual became a registrable controller, which is the day that he or she ceased to be a registrable controller. Okay, at that point in time, right, when it came to effect on 31st of March 2017, if your company is newly incorporated, right, you need to maintain the register of registrable controllers within 30 days from date of incorporation. That means that the register of registrable controllers will now actually have two forms. One is a hard copy form, which is kept at the registered office. Another one is the digital format, which is coming into effect. ACRA is trying to implement it this period of time. There are some delays to the implementation of the online portal, but I will touch on this later. Okay, so at that point in time, they gave the existing company 60 days from their commencement of the regime. But now, of course, everyone has to have already set up their register of registrable controllers. So if you are a Singapore company and you have not set this up yet, do note that you may be in breach of certain regulations, liable for a fine actually. Okay, so since May 2020, right, ACRA has set up a central non-public register of registrable controller, which the companies must update by July 2020. But based on some technical difficulties, right, ACRA is actually postponing it to 31st March 2021. If you guys have been using the BizFile Plus system the last 1.5 weeks, right, you realize that the system has been very, very slow and laggy and has crashed on countless occasions. And this is because I think there is a large number of people who are trying to update this non-public register of registrable controllers. And this has caused the server to actually crash. So you will still have to maintain your physical hard copy, but the digital copy, right, the non-public register of registrable controllers, right, the system will actually be postponed to 31st of March 2021. So it gives companies another like 3/4 of a year, right, to try to get this data proper. Okay, and this register, right, is not available to members of the public. So for example, if let's say somebody wants to know the business profile of a certain company, they can just go to ACRA's website and they can pull out the business profile and just pay a small fee, and then after that they will be able to see who are the shareholders and the directors of the company. But then if they want to pull out this register of registrable controllers, right, they can't, because this is a non-public register. So who will have access? Only law enforcement agencies will have access to the information lodged. For example, if let's say some people may be concerned that maybe a particular bank in Singapore or a certain company in Singapore may find out that they are a registrable controller of a company. The fact of the matter is that there's no way to find out because the register is not public. Okay, so only law enforcement agency though. So if the company gets into trouble and with the law, then these law enforcement agencies, they can actually pull out this non-public register of registrable controllers. So RFAs, which is registered filing agents, can only perform transactions, including lodging of register of registrable controller information for entities which are in client list submitted to ACRA. So we actually have to get your authorization as well. So for our clients, we would have them on our client list. There's actually a client list which we must maintain telling ACRA who are our clients. Then these clients have to authorize us to lodge and update the register of registrable controllers on their behalf. So we will have sent out some digital forms out to all our clients, and then they would they would answer the forms, the digital forms. Then we would be able to file for them. If let's say you are our client, right, then you never respond to our digital form, right, then technically we can't register on your behalf. Okay, so if let's say there are any changes, right, we also need to update within 2 business days. So just take note. So please note, companies and LLPs that do not comply will be guilty of an offence and shall be liable upon conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000. Yeah, so there's a penalty to it. So yeah, don't just pay the money for no apparent reason. Try to get your company in order. Just because you have not been taken to task for not complying, right, doesn't mean that in future you will be safe from a fine or penalty or conviction. Uh, Corporate compliance is very important. So if you're not familiar with corporate compliance, right, you can always contact us. I'll leave our contact details in the description in this YouTube video below. So that's all, and thanks for watching this YouTube video. We'll see you in the next video.